We move on to Learning Unit 5, which is digital technology. So on completion of this learning unit, you should be able to describe things like ICT, fourth industrial revolution, the digital childhood. You are expected to explain the concept of digital literacy and be able to differentiate technology as a subject and digital technology as well. So remember, you need to also identify and assess a variety of technological resources of the early years and investigate the skills needed, especially for the 21st century, which is very important for us to understand, especially as foundation phase teachers in this technological era. So we need to illustrate the use of TPAC framework in technology-based teaching and learning and argue for or against the use of digital technology in early years. So looking at this, the important things for you to understand in terms of the concepts of what is the fourth industrial revolution, what does digital childhood refer to, what is digital literacy, what do you understand by digital tools, and what is the 21st century skills. Like I said, it's very different in this generation because, everyone is born into technology and things are, going rapidly, it's especially with the COVID situation, things have just changed to a technological era within minutes, especially in schools throughout the world. Okay, so let's look at the fourth industrial revolution. When you're studying or going through this unit, remember you need to list the labels and definitions used to describe the innovation of today's new socioeconomic era. You need to understand the idea of the fourth industrial revolution suggested by the World Economic Forum and what they refer to, who wrote the underlying paper for the annual meeting. Understand this because this is all important information that builds your understanding of these important concepts. What is profiled in this paper? What does the technological revolution alter? How should we respond to the technological revolution? And you need to be able to describe this according to the World Economic Forum. In this, include and explain the age of global connections. And what does technology promise? What does it promise for our students of today, And you need to reflect on different authors' understanding. It's very important for us to go through this. So remember, when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, we stand on a brick of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, the way we work, the way we relate to one another, the complexity, the scope that, of transformation, is likely to unfold, especially now with our experiences during the COVID-19. So the response must be that it must be integrated, in terms of, especially in our academic world. So the fourth industrial revolution has been progressing since the start of the 21st century. And it's a revolutionary change, and it's characterized by mobile internet, cheaper, smaller, stronger sensors. The type of equipment and technology that we're using is just amazing. With the click of a button, you can do anything now. Okay, so throughout history, technology has generated the promise of a revolutionary society and a revolutionary change in education due to the technological advances that we speak of. So this diagram basically shows you, from where it was to where it is now. And it's very important for you to understand these transitions and focus on working with technology at this stage. We cannot ignore technology, maybe previously when it was still new to, to everyone, it was just something that was there, but not really used. But now it's very important that we integrate it into our teaching and learning, especially in schools today. Okay, so now we're looking at digital technology and digital childhood. Remember, working through this section, you need to understand How do you use technology on a personal level? Consider all of this, reflect on it. Why is technology so important in the professional or business world? What has technology done for the education system? And you also need to define ICT according to Crawford, 1997, and define digital technology. And also, how is technology used in the foundation phase? What is the understanding on the generational theory? You need to understand this so you can understand your students that you have today in your classroom. What are certain authors' idea on the generational theory? What are children born in the current generation known as? It's certain terms that may deem important in your exam. How can you describe this generation's children in terms of digital technology? Think about technology that came into being when you were a child. What impact did it have on you? In your childhood? Did it impact on your education? How did it influence your learning? Remember, now it's easy to research on certain topics. If you don't understand, something, it's very easy to gain your information. It depends if you can work with all these technological devices, and it's within a click of a button that you can find anything you need to know. Also, what does technology affect? And digital technology, digital childhood is also very important, like I said previously, to understand. So remember, when we're talking about digital technology and digital childhood, think about, how the world is transforming, the way people work, the way they play, love, play, whatever it is. Learning can happen whenever, wherever. And this has been evident, how schools continue to give education, even though schools, were affected by the closure due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So school systems around the world are developing the ability to provide learning opportunities for learners anytime, anywhere. And this is when we use digital technology, this is what they mean. And when it comes to digital technology, it refers to the technological tools, such as the internet, the devices, the applications, the social networking, that us as teachers and even students could use. Unfortunately, there is a digital divide where some schools and some areas were unable to continue in the way some could. So that's something that we also need to think about. And, you need to understand the context that you're teaching in. When it comes to digital childhood, remember, now children are born into the century, where in the current generation, it's known as Generation Alpha, I think. So they never knew a world without screens. I'm sure some of you would relate to me where it depends on the level of technology that, within the generation. So they were born with the first iPads. I think, in 2010. And as such, their lives will be seemingly obviously integrated into technology. You can't avoid technology at this point, especially with this generation that we're working in. And they are immersed in experiences that are completely technological, So we need to consider this when teaching science and technology during this current era that we're working in. So when we talk about the generation terminology, remember, children born in the current generation are known as Generation Alpha, like I said, and they never knew a world without screens. Okay, so what basic understanding does authors give about digital literacy? And you need to understand how education systems need to respond to change. Remember, during this COVID-19 pandemic, many foundation phase teachers found themselves in a complete state of panic because they were, this is young learners who are, who are dependent on their parents and are not fully independent to work on their own. So this is also something that we need to consider. Okay, so now we're looking at you also need to look at what is the focus in the industrial age. Since then, what was the focus shifted to? With all these changes in focus, what needs to happen in the educational outcomes? How does authors argue about what and how students learn? And we need to mention about what skills is needed for young children to manage in the 21st century. What framework did Partnership for 21st Century Learning develop? And what is included in this framework? What does this framework also account for? And what are all the components of this framework interconnected with? What 21st century skills does this advocate, in terms of integration, and what should these skills be integrated to help the learners of today and in terms of 21st century skills? And what does this framework provide for adults who work with young children? You need to name the 9 skills covered in the framework to develop young children for the 21st century and show the English language skills and outcomes that starts from a toddler to foundation phase in terms of communication. Okay, so when it comes to digital literacy and the 21st century skills, you need to understand that in the 21st century, learners need to be creative and innovative. They need to have critical thinking and problem-solving skills. They need to communicate. They need to collaborate. They need to be flexible, adaptable. They need to take initiative, be self-directed. They need to have social and cross-cultural skills, very important. And productivity and accountability is very important, especially in putting them in leadership and responsibility roles. In terms of, information and media literacy is also equally important. So when going through this section, please work through these questions and understand, what are you learning? What do you need to understand from this? This you'll basically take on to your classroom because you know the type of learners that you're working with at this point in time. So when we talk about, especially in this module, we are an exit module, and we want to give you digital resources for the foundation phase in order, to use different resources to make your teaching more effective, basically. So you get these websites. You can also note them down. They're in your study guide as well. It's basically a digital marketplace that has thousands of resources made by teachers for teachers. So it's a sharing forum. And also the Vodacom has incorporated no data charges. So all the content and resources on the website can be downloaded for free, which is extremely important for us as foundation phase teachers to know of these different forms of of gaining additional resources that can make our teaching more effective. Vodacom is also partnered with the Department of Basic Education to improve the quality of instruction in all subjects at every level and provide teacher development initiatives, which I think is great. And I think you should not pass on these opportunities to use these resources, enjoy them, work with them, and make your teaching more effective. So I want you to go through this and highlight it, maybe write it down somewhere so that you, in future or even now when you're planning lessons, you're able to use these resources. Okay, so now we're looking at the TPAC. Remember, many students found this complicated. It's because you have not read efficiently, you are not understanding, you're not interpreting. So you need to understand firstly, look at who introduced this notion, of the pedagogical content knowledge, the PCK. What content knowledge did it include beyond the knowledge of subject matter? What are the 2 areas of focus held by, the author? What is the PCK area described as? And using science as an example, what would be the subject matter, in terms of understanding when using PCK, a starting point. And you must be able to illustrate this as well. And what are believed to be the 3 primary constitutes of teaching with technology? You also need to explain your understanding of technology, the content knowledge, and be able to name the 7 knowledge areas of the TPAC, and also describe each knowledge area named above and be able to, apply it with examples. Why is this framework brought to your attention? You need to also consider this. What do you need to consider when using new digital tools? And these are questions that you should ask yourself with respect to each component of the TPAC in terms of technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. So it's very important that you note this as well. If you look at it, technological knowledge, look at the conceptualization of the TPAC framework. There's a diagram that's in your study guide as well. And technological knowledge is with what do foundation phase learners learn and what do foundation phase teachers teach. You need to consider all of that. The pedagogical knowledge, how do foundation phase teachers use technology to teach? And when it comes to content knowledge, what do I need to know to be able to teach? What content are the learners supposed to learn? How will technology help me find, gather, and become up to date with the content of teaching and learning in foundation phase? Very important for you to understand the TPAC framework, and be able to think of an activity that you would, do with learners using digital technology, and consider the TPAC framework above and reflect on whether you would include all the components of the TPAC when you decided on the activity, or certain aspects is something that you need to go through. Okay, so now we do looking at learning unit 6, planning for technology, teaching and assessment. On completion of this learning unit, you should be able to identify and interpret, technological process skills in the design activities of the technological problem solving approach. You need to be able to cite appropriate examples to demonstrate an understanding of concepts and process skills related to technology. You also need to analyze and interpret the technological problem solving approach and how you can integrate mathematics, language, creativity into your teaching approach. You need to be able to identify suitable context for the application of the technological problem approach, and again, compile research reports which you demonstrate the ability to design your own practice, based on technological problem solving in terms of mathematics, language, creativity, and develop team plans, according to the technological problem solving approach that you've undertaken. And you need to be able to apply your understanding of assessment, of technological education in the foundation phase. This is all very important for you to understand. Remember, there's some considerations for planning design activities. What is the design process central to? You need to consider all of this. And what considerations should be made for a design activity based on a topic, using examples to show your understanding. You need to be able to use appropriate topic in science and technology to follow the design stages. Remember, you need to be able to give learners activities for every stage and identify the habits of body and habits of mind that are identified at each stage. So remember, I did communicate, we did speak about this in the previous units, about habits of body, habits of mind. So do you see how everything integrates within each unit? This is how you need to go through your content unit by unit. Systematically is the best way to understand correctly. So learners develop, remember, the learners activities follow the design process. So in terms of creativity, and they're developing problem solving skills, and then they need to actually develop information gathering skills. So the design process is central to all of these, what we just said, the creativity, problem solving, and information gathering skills. Very important for you to understand that. Okay, so when you're developing a team using the design process activities, remember, you need to consider the technological problem in the foundation phase and develop this, using the design process activity. So you need to consider an investigative and investigation activity for a team plan, whether it's be designing or building something. Foundation phase, this is quite an interesting activity for young learners to go through. So if our topic would be, for instance, transport, then your intuitive idea would be, how does it move? When it comes to science, you'll talk about energy and change. When it comes to technology, you're talking about systems and control. And then the big idea would be cause and effect. And an example of the activity would be maybe designing or making boats that move and float on water. These are all exciting tasks for students, especially in understanding. So, if you're working through a science concept and then it focuses, moves on to a technology activity, it makes it more interesting for the student. Okay, so when you're developing your own team plan of design process activities, remember, this table here basically shows you how you could simplify your focus. I notice so many students find it difficult to work within a team plan. So you consider what type of skills are being developed in the making stage, how you could integrate visual, mathematical, scientific, technological skills in the making stage. So it's so important to integrate all of this. If your topic is basically how animals grow and change, then your intuitive idea is about biology. So how do I fit, science trend would be life and living. Like we mentioned in the previous units, you need to understand all the, the strands, the content strands, technology strand in terms of structures. And then when you talk about big ideas, can you see how you integrating from the other units as well, relationships and interdependence, place, cause and effect, and you're basically making a model for a house, for a dog. It just depends what examples you go through. And then you can work through this table and somehow, focus your team and develop it. Assessment in technology education is also very important. Remember, you need to when working through this section, you need to identify and describe what steps need to be followed in making stage of the design process. You need to develop a theme plan that includes assessment using the template of an assessment plan for technology education, which includes design stage, learner activity, and concepts and skills for the assessment. Remember, when working with assessments, it's always important to create a checklist for assessment, whether it be for the student or for you as a teacher, just to ensure that the learner was able to do each step correctly. Even whether it be selecting correct material, selecting the correct tools, measure accurately, that's in terms of mathematics, mark the cutting lines, cut safely, cut correctly. These are all things, especially in foundation phase, all of these processes are building towards them, being more effective in other grades. So create a checklist for assessment during each stage so that learners are given the opportunity to assess their own understanding. When things are given for self and peer assessment, they can assess what they must and, go back to it, or just work through the process simultaneously and be able to always work in that structure in a, where they don't miss certain aspects that can deem them to lose marks or whatever it may be. Okay, so there's this diagram in your study guide. It's the making stage of the design process skills relevant to making, just say for instance, a puppet. So remember, they need to first collect the materials and tools. Foundation phase students also need to be given like certain, what materials do they need. So if they're doing a puppet, they would maybe need buttons, scissors, needles, thread, or maybe they would need, just a sock or whatever it is. When we're talking about measuring, they may need a tape measure or, a ruler, pencil, pens, whatever it is. This is how they work through this process so that they make sure that the making stage is made in accordance to what the criteria expects them to do. Cutting along the dotted lines, that's very important, to work on the skill, to join certain things together, to finish off, and how to evaluate, does the puppet represent what they're making, or then that's when they start explaining and using communication to evaluate and to understand, what they've done. Okay, so that marks the end of Learning Unit 6. I must say that there is certain aspects that were not, touched on because this is a quick presentation, but please work through your module simultaneously, like from Learning Unit 1, work through that, go to Learning Unit 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. It's very important that you work in that order so that you pick up the skills and what is expected of you towards the end of this module. So I'd like to thank you for giving me your time and listening to this presentation. I hope it does help, and I hope you're feeling less stressed for the exam. Please try your best to work through all the content. There's nothing less important than the other. This is a module that needs to be, well addressed, well understood, well interpreted. And that's when your application of this model, where you can apply your knowledge in the classroom. And that's our aim, for you to be well-equipped teachers of today, especially in this generation and this technological era. You need to understand what type of learners you're working with, what can you do to make the learning more interesting, more fun, and more technologically competent, in this era. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this module, and I know that, you're working through each unit, and I wish you all the success in the exam. Thank you.